My parents sold their house of 30 years and handed every dollar, $720,000, to my brother as a wedding gift. I barely had time to process that betrayal before the next one hit. When I refused to evict my tenants so they could stay with me for a while, they showed up at the property with suitcases pounding on the door like they already owned the place. That was the moment I realized they weren't just crossing a boundary. They were invading my life. And what I did next left them stunned in a way they never saw coming. I should probably start by telling you who I was before everything snapped. My name is Alara Whitcomb, and for the last 8 years I've built a small but thriving interior design and custom furniture studio out of sheer stubbornness and sawdust. Most days you'd find me in a linen shirt, jeans, and my worn leather apron, hair tied back, sanding down walnut boards while the workshop heater hummed in the corner. It's the kind of life people underestimate until they see what those hands can make. And maybe that's always been my story. Underestimated until pushed too far. I grew up in a house where the rules were unspoken but sharp. Callan, the only son, was the investment. I, the daughter, was expected to be understanding. I heard that word my entire childhood. Be understanding when Callan gets the new bike. Be understanding when Callan's summer camp costs more than your entire school year. Be understanding when your brother needs help with college, but you can figure it out. So I did figure it out. 3 part-time jobs at once, eating dollar ramen, stitching together a degree I paid for myself. Meanwhile, Callan's tuition was wired straight from my parents' account the moment it was due. My mother used to say it with a smile like it was a compliment. Girls just don't need as much help, sweetie. You're stronger. At the time, I didn't realize she meant it literally. Less help. More burden. As an adult, I kept my distance. Not because I didn't love them, but because I could breathe better when I wasn't being squeezed into the role of the forever responsible child. Then I married Rowan, the first person who truly saw me. Not the version shaped by guilt or obligation, but the woman who fought her way into a craft she loved. We bought a cozy home in Briarstone Heights and started talking about building a family. Quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, late-night naming lists for the baby growing inside me. The soft kind of future I'd worked years to earn. And part of that stability came from the Silverbrook rental property. A small, steady investment I bought with my own savings. Miles and Saren lived there, a young couple trying to get on their feet. They paid on time, kept the place clean, never caused trouble. In my mind, they were the kind of tenants any landlord would bend over backward to keep. Which is why when my parents called one afternoon sounding breathless with excitement, I had no reason to brace myself. They told me they'd sold their house. 30 years of memories. The porch swing Dad built. The kitchen Mom painted 3 times. I imagined them finally taking cruises, gardening, settling into a slower life. I even smiled when Mom described how fast the place sold. Then she said it. We gave the money to Callan. All $720,000. Isn't that wonderful? I pressed the phone to my ear, waiting for the part where she laughed or said, "Just kidding," or even paused long enough to hear my silence. But she kept talking, listing the amenities of the penthouse Callan had found downtown. And then came the line that shifted something deep inside me. "We'll be moving into your rental for a little while. Just tell those tenants to leave." I don't remember what I said after that. Something flat and polite, the kind of response you give when your brain disconnects to protect itself. I hung up and stared at the wall of my studio while the scent of freshly cut oak floated around me, sharp and grounding. My parents had just given my brother $720,000 and without hesitation decided my property, my investment, would become their fallback plan. No request, no conversation. Just an expectation wrapped in entitlement. I told Rowan that night. He stood at the kitchen counter, hands braced on the granite, listening without interrupting. "You're not actually considering evicting them," he said gently. "Of course not." The answer was immediate, instinctual. "It's not even legal. And it's not right," he added. I nodded, but my stomach tightened because I knew what was coming. My parents didn't handle boundaries. They bulldozed them. The calls began the next morning. Mom first. Her voice sugary and fragile. Ilara, honey, you sounded stressed yesterday. We just need a place for a little while. Then Dad sterner. Your mother is upset. You should fix this. I repeated myself over and over. I can't remove tenants under a valid lease. It's illegal. It's unethical. But logic only works on people willing to hear it. By noon, Mom was crying. By evening, Dad was lecturing me about family responsibility. By the next day, relatives I hadn't heard from in months suddenly had my number memorized. Aunt Maribel called at 7 in the morning. Your parents gave everything to help Callan start his life. And you can't do one little thing? It's not little, I said. Well, you're the successful one, she snapped. You should help. That was the script. I was the capable one. The reliable one. The daughter whose comfort was negotiable because she could handle it. Callan texted me that afternoon. They need somewhere to stay. Be flexible, sis. Be flexible. As if that were the magical phrase that could erase tenant law or basic decency. I didn't respond. But the real explosion happened 3 days later. I was in my studio sanding the edge of a maple countertop when my phone buzzed non-stop. Miles's name lit up the screen. His voice trembled the moment I answered. Ilara, there are people at the door saying they're moving in. They have suitcases. They're yelling. My heart dropped. Describe them. It's an older couple. They said they're your parents. Course they did. I told him to stay inside, not to open the door, that I was on my way. Then I grabbed my keys, dust still on my jeans, and drove across Hawthorne City with my pulse hammering against the steering wheel. When I turned onto Silverbrook Lane, I saw them instantly. My parents on the front porch. 2 large suitcases beside them. Grocery bags dangling from Mom's wrist like they were checking into a vacation rental. Mom was pounding on the door so hard the frame rattled. Dad stood stiffly beside her, already rehearsing the lecture he'd give me for being difficult. I stepped out of my car. What are you doing? Mom spun around, furious and relieved all at once. They won't let us in. It's not your house, I said. It's family property, she insisted, as if saying it made it true. Dad took a step toward me. We've been in a hotel for almost 2 weeks waiting for you to handle this. You created that situation, I replied. You sold your house. You gave away your money. That doesn't make my rental your backup plan. Mom's voice cracked, switching to her well-practiced heartbreak. How can you talk to us this way after everything we've done for you? Miles cracked the door open just an inch. Do we need to call someone? He asked quietly. No, I said. Then I looked directly at my parents. But they will if you don't leave. The porch fell silent, the sharp, vibrating silence that comes right before something breaks. And in that moment, I understood exactly what I was up against. Not confusion. Not desperation. Entitlement so deep they truly believed my life existed to cushion their choices. They left the porch that day only because Miles picked up his phone as if he were about to dial. This isn't over, Dad muttered. Mom cried loudly enough for neighbors to peek through blinds as they dragged their suitcases back to the car like 2 people gravely wronged. I watched them drive away with a cold, hollow ache spreading across my ribs. It wasn't guilt. It was the realization that this was only the first attempt. By the next morning, the narrative had changed, and I'd apparently been assigned the villain role. My phone lit up before sunrise with a message from my cousin Brenner. I can't believe you'd abandon your parents like this. Then another from Aunt Maribel. We heard you refused to let them stay. They're practically homeless. Homeless. That was the word they chose, even though my parents had willingly handed their entire nest egg to Callan without so much as a second thought. The group chat I'd been forcibly added to filled with passive-aggressive messages about family duty and honoring your elders. Not one person asked what had actually happened. Not one asked about Miles and Saren or the legal lease. This wasn't concern. It was a coordinated guilt campaign. Rowan watched me read message after message while I sat at the kitchen island, one hand on my belly. You can block them, he murmured. I know, I said. And I did know. But blocking them didn't solve the larger truth. My parents believed they had unrestricted access to my life, my home, my resources. If I didn't stop it cleanly now, it would bleed into every part of the future we were trying to build. Around that time, news about Callan started trickling in. Through my cousin Lena, one of the few neutral voices, I learned the bank had denied Callan's mortgage application on the penthouse. They needed verification of income. He didn't have any. Without the loan, he couldn't close. Without closing, my parents' $720,000 wasn't coming back. Suddenly, their urgency made sense. 2 days later, Callan himself called. "Look," he said, sounding annoyed rather than embarrassed. "Things are tight right now. Briar and I still need to pay the venue. It's only $21,500. Can you help?" Only $21,500. As if I kept stacks of cash in the pantry for moments like this. I didn't hesitate. No. His silence wasn't surprise. It was offense. "Wow," he said. "Real supportive, sis." Supportive. Another word twisted into a weapon. That night, after one more round of messages from relatives insisting I step up, something inside me locked into place. I opened my laptop and began writing an email. Not emotional. Not defensive. Factual. Timeline of events. Screenshots of the lease. Records of the sale. Every detail in clear, undeniable language. At the end, I added one line. "If anyone believes my parents deserve housing more than my tenants do, please let me know when they can move in with you." Then I hit send to 30 people. By the next morning, the group chat was silent. The silence lasted almost a full day, long enough for me to hope briefly that the worst had passed. But entitlement doesn't disappear. Wait, it reshapes itself. And it returns wearing a softer mask. It was a Saturday morning in early spring. Rowan and I were in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counters while we argued playfully about baby names. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders felt loose. Then the doorbell chimed. Repeatedly. Rowan checked the driveway. His voice dropped. "Ilara. It's them." Opened the Ring app. There they were. My parents on the porch, dressed nicely, as if arriving for a holiday dinner instead of ambushing the daughter they'd been attacking for weeks. Mom held a bouquet of flowers. Dad carried a grocery bag. "Sweetheart," Mom said to the camera, smiling. "We brought the ingredients for your favorite pot roast. Let us in." "This is manipulation," Rowan said. He knew. I felt it in my chest. That old instinct to soothe. To give in. To make things easier. Dad cleared his throat. "We've had time to reflect. We made mistakes. Let's just talk like adults." I didn't open the door. "Please," Mom said. "We're tired. We miss you." "They're not here to apologize," Rowan whispered. "They're here to gain access." When I didn't respond, Dad's tone hardened. "This is childish. Open the door. We are your parents. We deserve respect. If you don't let us in, we'll stay here until you do." That was it. I dialed the non-emergency police line. "I need to report ongoing trespassing." When the patrol car turned onto our street, their confidence collapsed instantly. "You'll regret this," Dad said. But regret was never on the table. Relief was. 2 days later, a plain envelope arrived at their new one-bedroom rental. A formal notice from my attorney. Cease trespassing. In the weeks that followed, the noise finally quieted. My parents settled into a modest apartment on the edge of town. The calls stopped. The guilt faded. Miles and Saren stayed in the Silverbrook house, planting a garden in the backyard. At home, Rowan and I painted the nursery soft green, sunlight drifting across the walls. For the first time in my life, my boundaries simply existed. And the life on the other side of them was peaceful.